What is up? I'm Miguel Antonio, and this is the Live and Create podcast. It's where I talk with artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. On this episode, we have TJ Roberts. He's a business owner, he's a musician, he's an activist, and we talk about fighting for diversity within the workplace because he is the only Black man in his company within the state that he works in. He also shares the story of walking on to a D1 football program his sophomore year and the lessons he learned about building an environment that celebrates diversity of all kinds. It's a long one, but we dive into so many incredible topics. I hope you guys enjoy.
The Live and Create podcast.
Yeah, man. I mean, went through some really hard stuff. And then looking at it today, well, I'm still here. And there's still, things that I learned about myself and things that I didn't know. And then there's things that I've also, been able to kind of build a thicker skin for. So yeah, man, it's been an interesting year for sure.
That's for sure. No, I feel you, man. I've often said in the last few months, it's been a year where you figure out what you can live without. And even my wife and I were talking where we're like go people. Even when I used to tour with my band, I literally would be gone for like 2 weeks. I'd get home, I'd clean the van, we'd pile the kids in the van, then we go somewhere else as a family. Like we're just, I've always been that way. She's a lot that way. But again, this year we've been around home, and I think it was yesterday. We're driving around. I'm telling her, I'm like, it's interesting. I feel less stressed. I feel less anxiety now because I'm not constantly running and thinking about this and this. It's like life's going on. We got to get out there. So in some ways it's been nice. Now, granted, I want mine going out a lot more. Like every once in a while, it's like, go get a coffee at PT's and hide in the back room where there's nobody at, that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I am ready for it, but I feel you. I feel like I've learned a lot.
I'm right there with you too, man. I'm go as well. And so the change of pace is like, yeah, I'm still maybe go, maybe here. And then like, I try to put myself in busy situations where physically I'm still getting some of that satisfaction, if you will.
The energy.
Yeah, exactly. The energy. But then like I've really enjoyed, like you were saying, like just the slower processing of things. And like honestly, like for me, it's been like refining little things about me or what I do and how I do it, differently, and a large part of that in the business had to happen.
Right.
Because of the things that have changed in our market, but then also just for my simplicity of like looking at my calendar and being like, oh man, I have all day to just do these few things, so what more with my time, or who do I get to connect with or network with? And so you do a few things, like you explore internally and then you explore externally.
Right.
And so I think this year, like I explored more in both facets. And I think like I look at this time of year and been like, whoa, Christmas holiday was really peaceful, actually.
Right. We were just talking about that too. We're like, it's maybe one of the best Christmases we've had, even though it's been a lot less people.
Yeah. And simple, simple as well. And like kind of practical if you really think about it. And so it's just been those kind of nuances and like revelations in my life have been like really, really good to receive because, I looking pre-COVID, if the business and what I was doing and all the trajectory of where I felt like I was going, I mean, it was kind of gangbusters. I mean, I was busting.
Oh, you're hustling, bro. You're doing it.
So there was a lot of good things happening, and then they did go to a halt, and a lot changed during COVID as well. But looking back on it, I'm like, I don't know if that was necessarily like the healthiest thing for me emotionally to like be going through and trying to navigate a full year of that kind of, those types of activities. So it changed things, and you just refine and then you try to simplify. I think another thing too is like a lot of people who have family members and kids and whatnot have told me multiple times, like they've spent more time with their kids because of COVID, and they've learned to value a lot more of that time with them rather than, run into practices and recitals and school functions and activities. It's just been like, hey, we have a meal
We're
every
home.
day at 5 o'clock. This is weird. And so there's been, just
That's
some
so
really
true,
cool
man.
conversation. Yeah. And so that, I think that's been good though, for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, to slow that down and to have that pace. I mean, it's just, and back home, where I'm from, like it's a slower pace of life, as you
Right.
know.
Oh
So,
yeah.
it's like here, you don't realize that even 2 hours away, there's people that are completely like, probably more than 1 million people are forgetting like the realness of their life and the reality of their relationship with their kids or their
Yeah.
friends or their family and close ones. So it's very unique how different the lifestyles are between like
Small town USA and then city. I would say we're getting to be a big city here. But
oh
yeah,
yeah.
no, I feel you. It's a different vibe. But that's
So
yeah.
with like
Oh, go ahead.
music and stuff, like how I mean in Kansas City, like there's not a great big platform that is like developed or created or followed
Mhm.
by the masses, I will say.
Right.
I'm sure there are some out there I'm just not aware of. But I mean, how has the market in Kansas City as far as changed towards music? Because I know like there are some local places that have tried to have outdoor events with music and
Right.
live performance and things like that. So like are those gigs still kind of happening? You just have to have a good in, or are you basically, if you were an independent artist, you're SOL?
As an independent artist, if you're strictly an original artist, like the original music, the club kind of thing, where bands are like writing, recording, trying to get their stuff out of there, from my understanding, is pretty much dead. And the big parts like Record Bar, the Rhino, those are huge venues that have always supported local artists, and they're struggling to hold on. And like there was a benefit for the Record Bar. I was part of a benefit for the Rhino, just wanting to see them continue and move forward. Now they're restructuring things. I know the Rhino's doing they've like rented out space and they're creating like a photo studio. Ben
You
McBee's
know Ben
there.
McBee?
Yeah, I actually just did my photo shoot with them last week for my 2021 branding stuff, and yeah, so
Cool.
he's doing that kind of stuff. They're running. I think you were doing a show there out of there. I saw
Yeah,
you
there
filming
was.
there.
I was tied to a production crew that was doing that. I like recently, like maybe the last month or so, like stepped away from the production crew that I was working with just
Yeah.
because like there was an ethical business sense
Ah.
happening, and as I was bringing those things up to them, they just didn't really care. And I'm
Huh.
like, well, that stuff is important to me because I'm an ethical business person, and I
Yeah.
don't want to be around something that's not. So
Well,
I just
kudos to you,
decided,
my man.
yeah.
That's
So I just decided to walk away. And so that was something that was like, it was hard because like I have that goal, right, that I mentioned to you of doing. But it's since kind of shifted into something that is still possibly going to happen. It's just going to happen
mm,
with some different people involved. And definitely for the better, and
yeah.
when I left them, I was like, hey, like no bad blood, like my like thought process and business and ethics aren't valued here and aren't needed, so I'm just gonna go somewhere else where I feel like they will be.
That's
And
such a critical. I think that's a critical skill, though, to be able to know what you want and what you believe, what your values are, and not turn away from them. Yeah, even if it means it's going to cost you. I've definitely had to leave some places in the past. One place was a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money, and found out they were basically committing insurance fraud. And I even wrestled with it because it was a lot of money, and I was like, I just can't. I'm not gonna be able to sleep at night. I don't want to do this,
yeah.
And so that's kudos to you, man. So you're like it feels like you're everywhere. Even in 2020, I see you on magazine covers and or like magazine posts or something. I don't really
Yeah.
see covers
No,
of things. But
no, you're
so
right.
let's cover some of the things real quick. So you're in insurance, right?
I'm in
And
insurance,
what's
yes.
the company that
So
you're
I'm an independent contractor with a company called Farm Bureau Financial Services.
yeah.
And I've been doing that since I was 23 years old. So I started that business in 2015, and I had done insurance sales with a prior company called AAA Insurance before.
Okay.
But at AAA, I was more like I was a W-2 employee, so I was kind of told when to show up, how many calls to make, what's that kind of thing.
Right.
And I actually really enjoyed that. I
Oh,
learned a
okay.
lot about the insurance industry. But like as you know, like my dad being an entrepreneur, my mom
Yeah.
kind of having some of those entrepreneurial traits as well, like seeing my parents be bosses, and not so much from the boss standpoint, because like I saw my dad be a boss, and get on to people, but I also saw my dad like have a lot of integrity and a lot of respect from people that he worked with, like you and others, and then that integrity.
Yeah.
And so like that to me those were really quick, like you were talking about the values that I wanted to carry as a business owner.
Right.
And so in 2015, I saw that opportunity with Farm Bureau. So I took advantage of it. I'm the only African-American employee of the state of Kansas for the company.
Now that was something I saw online, because I'm going to stop you there. Like my mouth dropped when
Yeah,
you shared this really cool thing. That was one thing that, we've been friends for, I've
a
known
long
you
time.
since you were like 13, something like
I
that.
was little, man.
Even
Yeah,
littler.
I was way younger than
That's
that.
true. You
Probably like 8 or 9
were.
is when your talents really came into my world, and that was your
Gotcha.
singing with
That's
Glee
crazy
Club,
that
baby.
I've known you that long, man.
Oh,
That's nuts.
yeah.
But and your dad helped me get through college because he gave me a job, which was amazing. So, but anyway, so I'm looking and reading like all the things you've accomplished, which I know you've always been successful, been on this great success track. But then reading that, so the only African American owner in
Yeah,
Kansas.
business owner in Kansas. So there's
That's
not
wild.
there's not another African American, not even in customer. I found out the other day, not even in customer service. Like there's not an African American
In
employed in
Kansas.
customer service
So you're
in Kansas.
breaking some huge barriers. And now
There's
for
a lot to
you,
overcome for sure. Yeah,
right. So for
and it's
you,
still happening.
go ahead. Sorry.
It's still it's still a process. With this year, with everything going on socially, I did some really bold moves with the
Mm-hmm.
company. I was rookie of the year with this company in 2016.
Nice.
And then also have been a top, top 50. There's 1,800 agents out of 7 states.
Mm-hmm.
Of those 7 states, there's about 1,800, like I said, and there's probably 6, if I remember correctly, African Americans employed out of those 1,800. So it's a very
That's
very small
wild.
number. I remember I hired an assistant who spoke Spanish. And we didn't have anyone in billing till 2019 that spoke Spanish.
That is wild. But it seems like at least a door is cracking.
It's
In
a door. It's a
regard
door
of
that's
minorities
cracking.
coming into the company.
Yeah, there's I mean, it's just a little bit of light's coming through, but yeah, yeah. It's barely enough to peek through, but it's definitely a conversation that like our company has been having. I've been having with our company, and that was something that was honestly, I will say I did not professionally invite them on that communication. I honestly publicly called them to a conversation, and that was
Okay.
just where I was just, we get these internal emails,
Mm-hmm.
and we have been getting them on Fridays really since COVID, and it's
Yeah.
just this big CEO email from the CEO, like, great job, keep up the good work.
Great job. Keep making money, and we're gonna make it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And about 5 weeks after George Floyd, there was an email that was put out it didn't talk specifically about the situation, but it shed some vague foreshadowing over it, and it mentioned diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
And I was just like, oh, well, that's interesting,
You're like,
because no one has called me at this point within the company.
and you literally are the diversity at that point.
Literally,
You
I mean,
literally
if you're defining it,
the
if you're
diversity.
defining it, yes. And so then like a week goes by, and the following week on Friday, there was another email. It was more about the diversity and inclusivity
Okay.
topic, but it was like, this is all the things we're doing about it. Here's all that we're talking about it. And I'm like, I'm like, excuse me, like my phone is not ringing. Like, who are you talking to? Because like I'm not getting talked to. So then I just got mad.
Okay.
And so I did some research. I found a plethora of companies that had publicly said something about either gay rights, because I wanted to also include them in that conversation,
That's awesome.
but gay rights, and then African Americans. And so if I didn't see anything about that on their public scene of social media, I basically called every business that hadn't and said, hey, and pointed the finger at them and said, this is something that has been going on for such a long time. I mean, you really can't put it's in the centuries, it's
Right.
been going on for such a long time. It's that long. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is the amount of people that were around me that just woke up to racism in 2020 literally was shocking. Like,
Yeah.
could not believe
I've
that
walked a
people were
similar
just like,
road. Like people who
yeah.
I had a friend come up to me and just shaking his head, like I just had no idea this even existed. And I had to share with him, like I went through the same process in my early 20s because
I mean, bro, if you were
yeah.
with your talent in music,
Mhm.
right, and you were a white person,
Yeah.
right, boy, would your world look different.
But
Like,
even for me though, I went through this strange kind of acceptance of it in my early 20s because though I'm Puerto Rican, I look like I'm white. I walk into a room, I'm a white guy. I live like a white dude, like no one just judges me automatically when I walk in the room. Except often I get asked if I sell weed. So that's a whole other conversation. But apparently I put off a vibe on that. Maybe it was when I used to wear a beanie during the middle of July. Maybe that's what like tipped it off
that's probably what did it,
in
man.
the
That's
tattoos. But
yeah.
and I grew up in a very diverse family. We had Puerto Ricans, we had black people, we had white people, Germans, Dutch, and so I thought racism was over until my friends who were black started explaining the things that they went through and they lived through. And they even now my oldest son who's 16 and he's mixed, he's Mexican and African American, starting to see the world through their eyes. And there's a shift. There was a shift for him where he was super cute, and then he started getting followed by police. And it was like, and all my other kids look white or are white. One is completely white. The other one is Puerto Rican and white, but they all appear white. None of them have the same problem. And so it's like I had to start open my eyes. But then now I'm seeing, like you said, like over this last year, so many people who it's just not in their realm to open up. But you're in this conversation with them, trying to challenge them at this point. Their reception was there a good reception? What did that look like?
It's still ongoing. So yes and no. At this point, looking at we've talked probably as far as me having direct conversation with the state, local leadership, as far as like vice president and sales and those types of people and HR.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've had we probably had 2 or 3 conversations, and nothing is really no actionable things have happened.
Okay.
But the conversation started out like, I mean, think about it from their perspective for a second. They just got called out publicly by one of their own sales reps.
Right.
That they're being disingenuous and dismissive over something that has happened over the centuries.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that you can't argue it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, people
try
to
argue it,
but
yeah,
you can't honestly argue it.
There's no way. And so like my company reached out to me when that first happened, when I first called them out, and they were like, what do we need to say? What can we say? What is something? Give us examples and so forth. And I'm like, well, first of all, I ain't getting paid for that. Number one, if you want to start, I'll do some research if you want to start paying me, but I'm not paying to fix your guys' problem. You have people that you employ for that. Right. If you need to employ someone for me, I'll let you know what my rate is, And then second of all, I shouldn't have to solve my company's own problems. Like these are common sense, practical, like just follow the Bible's golden rule, treat each other as you would treat yourself. I mean, let's just start there. Right. And so there was some conversation, but that conversation did yield them to say something publicly and post something publicly on LinkedIn and on Facebook and things about equality and inclusivity,
Right.
and more along the lines of like we love serving our clients who are from all of these different backgrounds, and so we think and acknowledge that basically
Right.
is what the gist of that post was. But since then, to be honest, it's really hard. It's really hard from my perspective because you're an angry black man or woman pointing out to a white person that they're being that what they're saying or what they're doing isn't enough. And
Right.
and on their side, it's really easy to dismiss that. And you know, on our side, it just makes us more angry, right? And so where we're
Because now
kind
you're
of
being
at,
written off at this point.
yeah. So
And
where we're at is we had that discussion, and that
mhm.
discussion didn't go anywhere good. But the
Okay.
way that it did, in my defense, and this is from my opinion, is that at one point I had my manager, we were on Zoom, I had my manager, my vice president, and HR. We're having this discussion, we're going back and forth. There's some big, like, there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of
Okay.
tension in the discussion and in the topic. And basically at the very end, we had the end of the discussion because it was very intense. It started getting
Mhm.
very intense. And just for professional, you know, I respect all of the people that were on the call and had no bad blood against them personally. We were just talking about
Mhm.
something that's very, very difficult for both people to
Right.
fully verbalize and understand. And you know, one of the things that they just said, we just don't like the tone you're using. We don't
Mhm.
like your tone. That was literally what I was like,
Okay.
oh, okay. And I just said, and our vice
You're
president
like,
was a
I don't like the
female.
racism and the structural things that are
Yeah,
built
yeah,
against all the.
exactly. But again, there's like how, as a person of color, like how do you present that in a way that's not angry, right? I mean, because
Right.
it's impossible to take your emotion out of that because we've all experienced it to some degree.
And that's a
So
position of authority where now they're trying to take control, whether they know it, whether it's passive or very intentional. Like it's a sign of I am in control. Like those are conversations I have with my kids. Like,
yes,
hey,
yes,
watch your tone when you're talking to mom.
exactly. So
But when
this
you're a
was
grown
where I
ass
flipped the
man trying
script.
to have a real conversation,
Yes. So I flipped the script on him because the vice president is a female, and I reached out to her, we gave our closing thoughts, and she said in her closing thoughts that she was very upset and she was really sad, and she
okay,
was very emotional when she was talking about this. So I know it was coming from a very authentic and sincere place because
right,
she does. Again, we both have respect for one another.
hmm
When it got to my turn, I said, Michelle, I have great respect for you, and I really care about you, and I know these things have nothing to do with our relationship personally, but we both can agree that things need to change. And you had mentioned that my tone wasn't appreciated. I said, Michelle, you have kids. Am I correct? And she says, yeah, I have kids. She's in her 50s. And I said, Michelle, you ever told your kids to not touch something? And she's like, yes, I've told them many times in their lifetime, don't touch this, don't touch that. I was like, cool. When it got to a point where you kept having to remind them for maybe even years, maybe decades, did you start saying, if you touch that one more time, I'm going to spank you, or you're going to get grounded, or you're going to get in timeout, so forth? And she goes,
right.
absolutely. I said, that's my tone.
That's good.
And she sat back in her chair, just
It's like,
like this.
damn.
And she was like, okay, I understand.
Hmm.
And that's where we ended at. And that was our first discussion. And that has slowly started to become more fruitful because we're
Right.
both in that, like, there is more understanding on one end where they can understand where I'm coming from, but they're and in some degree, you know, I'm 1099, so I'm an independent contractor, so there's only so much they can go as
Right.
a company that's not in charge of TJ Roberts LLC.
Which is nice being the
But
boss.
which is nice being the boss. Exactly. So we've just been having this discussion, and it's
Yeah.
slowly turning into maybe like a diversity and inclusive you know, committee that's across the company,
hmm
that I would help organize, and we would, my goal would be that we would create a different merit structure, because there's some things that have happened in my career with this company where I don't feel appreciated or valued as a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of things that have like happened financially that could have happened and really been a huge benefit to my business financially, based off of my work ethic and my credentials and, the so forth of that my company has overlooked because of nitpicky things, or, oh, this guy was married. We saw the 300 clients that he could get. We saw that benefiting him more than that you. And I'm like,
I see.
but
Right.
I'm working 3 times and selling 5 times more than that guy. Why would you not, and so there's just a lot of that things. And so I was
find
like,
a way to true meritocracy.
to truly merit this situation. So that way, as a company, looking at it from a standpoint as a company, I can't say I'm not getting the same treatment that everyone else is getting because of my color.
Right.
And when I said that, they go, because they're like, oh snap, like you actually do have grounds here, and you're actually like, you probably have every right to be pissed off, but you're trying to help us out at the same time. And so it's like there's that beginning phase of conversation with that, and so that's been good. But it's gonna take so much time, man. It's gonna take so much time.
Well, it sounds like
as a nation.
Yeah, it sounds like you're dealing with this as best as you possibly can, because the reality is that anger is a very real thing, and it's coming from a very real place. Like, it's been interesting understanding more of Malcolm X, where a lot of people saw him as the angry black man, and Martin Luther King the nice black man who's going to come in and smooth things over, which in reality there was a lot of things that King was doing behind the scenes, not him per se, but his crew, that were stirring shit up too.
Yes.
But it's interesting when you look at history and how Malcolm X came across as this angry black man. But when you understand his words, when you see what he's talking about, it's coming from a very real and powerful place. And there's never, and it's like, you talk about gay rights, you talk about rights for people of all different colors. Like, there is a place to stand on that anger. Like, they shouldn't have to like cower to people.
Yes.
They should be able to be strong and be able to be who they are. And I think that same thing we saw as women fought for their own rights, where they had to, in some ways, come across as submissive, but in reality, there's these strong women who were ready to lead, who were ready to get out there, but people were holding them down. So no, they shouldn't have to cower to the authority. And it becomes about power structures at that point.
Yeah, and I also think it's power structures, and it's also like it's almost devaluing the power structure, because I have to prove that the systemic situation that's happening in our world is actually false, right? I have to prove like this was a funny conversation. President's Day came up this year, right? And I was like, "What's your favorite president?" Worst question to ask online. Because during an election year, holy crap.
And a crazy ass election year.
Crazy ass.
Yeah.
And so someone said George W. Bush, and then, I messaged them. I mean, they said George W. Bush, and they gave me all the reasonings. And I messaged them, and I said, how much do you know about George W. Bush? And they go, oh, well, he was a great president, this and this and this. And I'm like, no, like.
He does paintings. I love it.
Yeah, and his teeth were wooden, but it's like George Washington. I said, do you know how George Washington died? And
you're talking Washington himself. Oh, you had said Bush. I thought you were talking about Bush.
Yeah, sorry, I meant Washington. Sorry.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's
so I'm like, do you know how George Washington died? And they're like, no, and they're like, yeah, he died of pneumonia. I'm like, do you know how he got pneumonia? And they were like, no. I was like, he was having sex with his slaves. And his wife found out and locked him out of the house.
I didn't know
and
that.
He got sick and died.
Damn.
That is how George Washington died. George Washington loved black women.
And his wife locked his ass out the house. He was in charge of the whole country. And that's when everyone should have known women are truly powerful.
That's exactly my point, man.
It's like, I don't care that you ran the country.
But I'm just saying, like, that is something that's not taught in schools.
Right.
There are things that we pull out of our system every single day that our kids are ingrained into, that we, as maybe even as an adolescent or people responsible for their knowledge, like we don't realize, and it's because like it's the systemic of what this is created on is false, and some of that is true and some of it's false. And so that's been a unique thing. And I think the other thing too with this year is, the election. It's just with everything going on. I have Black Lives Matter signs, and I'm the only business down the street that has Black Lives Matter signs in front of my door.
Right.
I felt like it was fitting for my skin tone. But man, the amount of people that walk by this year because of Trump and Biden and that whole thing, and then all the social injustice. I mean, I have huge 12-foot wide windows, and people will walk by and they'll see the signs and they'll forget that it's in a window, and they'll make a face or they'll say something underneath their breath, and I can hear it or I can see it. And then they finally make eye contact with me, Miguel, and dude, absolute embarrassment, absolute shame, absolute literally coward walking away when they realized that I saw what they said or did.
Right.
And it's funny to me how what that looks like. I mean, like from their perspective to my, like, I'm always like, why are they ashamed of what? I mean, if that's really the way they feel, why are they ashamed?
Well, and unfortunately, I feel like there's a lot of people who used to whisper things in their living room to a spouse or to a friend, where now we see it more in the public sphere, and things that people, in some ways, it's kind of heartening to know that someone at least had some shame about it, because unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people carry some views recently where they don't have shame anymore, and they're totally,
I question the shame, if it's the shame because they know it's majority like it's a very the way that they're thinking, the way that they're responding is outspoken to what the masses would say or agree with.
Right.
I wonder where is the
shame is coming from.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and that's where I feel like there's got to be some people, like I know somebody who has experienced racism. They are a minority, but they are vehemently against any of the protests, not even like the destructive protests, because now you have to have conversation about protests and riots and all that, which is a whole other deep conversation. But they celebrate the running over of protesters. And when I confronted them on it, they just doubled down. And I was like, I was right by a car that almost ran over protesters, and I can tell you what the situation was. And they just doubled down, and I'm like, you've experienced racism. You know what that's like to live as a minority. And they don't even see it. So there's certain things that I can't even fathom. I don't even understand. Maybe it's part of tribalism, and they see themselves in this particular camp. I'm pretty liberal, so liberals can see themselves in that same way, because but what has been encouraging, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I'm seeing a lot of liberals kind of speak out against even things they're seeing in the current or the upcoming administration, where they're already seeing some things like, hey, we need to call that out.
And there's been to wrap that up, like there's been some self-awareness too, with this election year, probably more so than there ever has been, because of like all of the stories with Facebook under extreme scrutiny this year. It probably favored the authenticity of the election, in my opinion, because because people are like, well, if Facebook is having any influence in my thought process in this, then I need to probably do my own research and figure out my own reasonings. And so I think that has been happening more so this year, and you are starting to see people that are looking more from a selfless point of view, rather than themselves, even though they hadn't maybe experienced racism themselves, or maybe they had. But I think that to the point of this person that you mentioned is like people will look at my Black Lives Matter sign and be like, oh, he's a Democrat and he supports Black Lives Matter, and it's like those are the things like. Yeah. That's actually what's the problem. Like it's actually the fact that you see that, and then you come up with these categories and these niches of groups that people are in a box. And I'm like, look, I'm a black guy that actually appreciates some country music.
Right.
and I enjoy indie rock, and the Beatles is one of my top 10 bands. Like, I mean, like I could go on and on about how maybe I'm a little bit different than the average African American, but it's just unique. And so I think like I really fight myself on making sure I don't
Yeah.
categorize people and put
That's a
people in
good
boxes.
reminder because I had a guest who's his episode's coming out soon, but he's a big dude, tattoos, all this, and he often found him. We had a conversation about that where people automatically judge him as a certain kind of person the moment he walks in
Yeah.
the door. He's like, and I'm not equating it to like what he made it clear, like I'm not equating it to like what minorities go through because that's a whole other level of thing. He said, but I feel like I catch a glimpse of why it would be so hard because people just judge you automatically. Or like I'm into guns and that's one of my like hobbies, but I'm also ultra liberal. And I said to a friend of mine, I was like, they're going to pull my liberal card here soon, and he goes, why does it have to be that way? Like why can't you
Yeah.
have a real conversation?
It's
Because I am
still a funny
empathetic
joke,
to all
Miguel.
the
That's
yeah.
still a funny
It was
joke.
funny. It was funny, but he brought up a good conversation. Like, why does it have to be that way? Where can we have? And I think the biggest thing is what I even hear in your conversation is the nuance of it. Like, I'm willing to have these tough, hard conversations about all the details. Like, it doesn't fix it just to put something up about inclusivity. We have to have real conversations, and it doesn't fix it just to ignore the problem either. So, how do we get into the nuts and bolts of every day? How does our life work? How does our company work? Which it seems you're going through. But you
Yeah,
have
and
kind of
it's
a go ahead.
and one of those things with that too, in what you're talking about, and we'll jump into where you're asking, but like
Okay.
one of the things too is in my business, man, how many just for example, how many white or how many I mean, next to the new Jake, because there was an old Jake,
An
there's a
old
new
Jake.
Jake to State Farm,
Okay.
and next to that, I mean, there was no representation for African Americans in the
Mm,
insurance industry at all. And so for me, it's I have to have accolades up, like my degree, which
mm-hmm.
is over here on a different desk, or I have to show like all the awards that I've won with this company to really
Right.
show that I'm educated, right? Or that I have a college degree and that I know what I'm talking about, rather than maybe if I was white, I walk into a room and say, hey, I'd like to invest your $500,000, Mr. Smith, that Mr. Smith just goes ahead and go, all right, here you go, man. And just, that doesn't happen for me.
Right.
There's a lot of getting to know me with my clients because they do have those unbiased thoughts about,
Right.
people. And that's like subconsciously assumed,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's unique and having those conversations and with that, man, is like part of this whole thing this year has been one of the most challenging things because you check your support. I have checked my support system so hard, Miguel, that if people just didn't do or not do what I said they would do, or if they weren't aware or comprehensive to what was happening around their world. And I mean, my parents pretty well. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
challenging my parents to stop reading or not to just read Fox News,
Right.
right? Stop just reading Fox News, mom. Like everything you're receiving is there's an agenda to it. So let me
Yeah.
give you someone else's agenda. Let me give you someone else's understanding or some
Mm-hmm.
other point of view. And so like with that and checking my system and all that has been, how do I respond and have these really difficult conversations while I'm continuing to honor the Lord? Because that
Mm-hmm.
to me is the most important thing. And then number two, like as an African American Christian, like how am
Right.
I responding to what is happening in the world? And how am I doing that in a way that's like promoting and glorifying God's characteristics on this earth through a black man?
Yeah.
And
Which I
that's
can only
been
imagine
really,
how much of a struggle that would be.
yeah, it's been challenging, it's been difficult, but I mean, like that's kind of where I'm at. Like that's kind of where I'm centered at. And every once in a while, man, I'll have a spat. I'm like, oh,
But I think that is part of it. Where if we're going to have real conversations with people, that anger and emotions are going to like you see that in marriage. It's like my
yes,
wife and I, we've been coming up on like 11 years here, and we've had huge fights. Thank you, and we've had to talk about hard things. But usually it's after those those things, and when you calm down, and if you really want to have that relationship, whether it be friend or
Yeah.
marriage or coworkers, that it's after those things. Now, unfortunately, there are certain things that at least I found this year have become irreconcilable. And that's hard, and maybe not even irreconcilable, but I've equated it to, I've burned some bridges, and I burned them, not that they can't be rebuilt, but
Yeah.
one, I'm not going to be responsible for rebuilding them.
Hmm.
Two, to rebuild them, they're going to have to put a lot of work in, and they're going to have
Yeah.
to show like there is change that has happened. And it's been a way that I used to not do that in my life. I used to never believe in burning those bridges. But what I found was I was allowing myself to be around toxic people who ended up becoming, in a way, like draining from me. And so I had to finally
Draining and
kind of,
just weighing you down.
right.
And, and I like to have less distractions, more fun activity,
Right.
So I'm all about, like, what I do is really boring. I try to make it fun. So I kill everything with enthusiasm.
Yeah, like watching you online, it makes insurance look really interesting and fun. It's like this dude it's which I do love. Like you seem to be about the community and building up, not just like making money, but you want to build a brand. And I think brand has become some negative connotations, but when I say brand, it's like the overall culture that you're trying to disseminate into the world. It seems like you're focused on that, which I love. What
Yeah.
inspires you to build that kind of brand through your business?
Honestly, probably like a few years back, I really started to look around me a little bit more. When I entered every meeting room at Farm Bureau, I started to look around the room. When I started to look at the insurance industry in the metropolitan of KC, I started to look around the room. When I started to look at small businesses and how they support their communities and nonprofits, I started to look around the room, and I
Mm-hmm.
started to find really, really just like sad statistics around all of those things.
Hmm.
And was really like, well, what if I really pushed into the minority of those statistics? What if I was the anomaly to those statistics? What would that look like? What would I have to do? What would I have to take? What would
Mm-hmm.
be some things that I would have to sacrifice, and some of that was like, the love of money. Like, everyone loves money. Money is great. It can get you to here and maybe in a few years Mars. But like, what money doesn't allow you to do is it doesn't actually buy you the most important thing. And I think what I've realized more so, and maybe you can agree with me this year, is time.
Mm-hmm.
Time is, man, it is not a finite like thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can go and come, and we only get one day. We're only going to have one December 28th, when we did this, but there's
Yeah.
only going to be one time. And so really, when I started to factor that, and I wanted to look at the statistics and then look at like the impact that I wanted to make both in my community and in my life, like,
Mm-hmm.
there was like a few like one-liners. Like, one of my favorites is, I have friends, not problems.
Hmm.
And so I've always wanted to have a really good group of people that I could trust, that I could really like cling to, hold me accountable in my trajectory of my growth as a leader and as a business owner, but also just as a person. And so I started to surround myself by friends that were like-minded, that were also
Yeah.
selfless, that were also successful and wanting to do more for others. And so that was number one. And then number two was just, man, I get so much satisfaction seeing people work together. Collaboration, and honestly, it's a mystery to me why people don't collaborate more. Here in Mission, where the business is, I've really focused, and that was the biggest part, about building community that worked together.
Mm-hmm.
We had, like, your people that live in the community, and then we have your people that don't live in the community that just come into work. And then being on the city board and getting more comprehensive like statistics of the city and like the demographics and those types of things, I started to see how they all kind of related to one another and how they worked.
That's cool.
And we really I started to kind of like, I don't know if you will, like, be a like a chemist or something. Like, I was, oh, let's sprinkle a little bit of that, let's sprinkle a little bit of this. And we just started doing like, we did like a community-wide event where we did sidewalk sales, and that was solely for during COVID, with retailers that were really having a hard time, making ends meet. As I would get to go, a big part of my business was like when I moved my business to Mission, it was my focus and the mission of that move was like to be the best friends to the city soul, you know?
That's cool.
And so like my biggest goal was I need a long-term lease. I need to be here for a very long period of time and show my face a lot. And it'll be an extremely disservice to the community and to myself and to the business if after 6 years someone sees me and doesn't go, hey, TJ, you know, in Mission and know what I do and what I'm about. Those are the types of things. So that's the branding, right? That was like
That's
the
huge. I
branding.
like that right there. Like that as a measurement. Like if someone in 6 years doesn't see me and they can't recognize who I am, what, like you said, what I'm about. Like, I don't know. I just feel like what you just said was so
Yes.
critical, so important.
I think it's
how
really
powerful
important for any
long term.
small, yeah, and any small mom and pop business, like sales is changing a lot. Sales is on the sales industry. Look at car industry over the last 10 years. If you look at car industry now, 10 years ago, if someone 10 years ago told you that you could go to a place and you could do an actual like pinball machine approach to buying a car and have it shipped here to Kansas City at Carvana and taken home, like it was a little token, like someone would look at you and be like, that's crazy, because someone's going to want to negotiate the price, or they're going to want to have finance options, or, you know, all of those things. Now, literally, now you can do that all ahead of the time. And it's changed to where it's more serviceable for their consumer to come in and make it easier and a better experience.
Are you familiar with Daniel Pink's book, To Sell Is Human?
I don't think so.
At all. If you ever get a chance, definitely check that one out. And he breaks down the shift that has happened over the last decade, what you're really talking about, and where it used to be buyer beware, and now he calls it vendor beware, because now the consumer has all the power. Like yesterday I was in Lowe's debating whether I wanted to buy a snowblower, and I'm looking at prices. I'm looking at prices at Home Depot. I'm looking at, like, I can see everything. And so, now I've literally made choices. I didn't buy the snowblower, but in other contexts, I've made choices off of where do I feel like they actually are going to care about what we're doing. And I've left places that I used to go to that were more expensive. Like we went to a place that was more expensive for a service we needed just because they did so much care. But then they started getting big and they lost that like customer service thing. And we kept paying the higher prices because we liked them and we liked what they were about and the service. But eventually we just left because we're like, after 2 years of seeing them push us aside, it's like, it's just not worth it anymore. So it's
I think the Midwest, you're right. And I think the Midwest motto is people do business with people they like. In the Midwest, and it's you know, I've had clients that I've sat down with, you know, and we just do things a little bit differently. Where you know, I call myself, I'm the boutique insurance guy, and I'm the guy that also knows a guy, because I network all the time, and I'm going to put my best foot forward in any, you know, anything that make your world easier and better. Like that's my goal. You know, and you know, when I see people like ask for recommendations about landscapers,
you're like,
I'm always like, well, yeah, but then I'm always like, boy, you're going to get probably 5 bad ones before you get one good one, you know? And rather than, I know people that I've seen do quality work. I've had customers refer to me or this, that, and the other. And I know that their craftsmanship and skill and care to their service is, you know, expert, you know, is great. But I think as a backup, like I think the biggest thing with that was just the boutique insurance. And so I thought of myself as like, if you're JE Dunn or you're KU Med or they just got bought out, but you know, Garmin, if you're a huge company and you pay a health insurance premium and a home and auto, like an auto and home premium or whatever, and you're paying, you know, you're writing $500,000 to $1 million check to Creative Planning for all of the services that they provide for your insurance. Okay. And you go in there and Creative Planning has an in-house chef where they can make hors d'oeuvres for the meeting, and they can offer you a Coke and a really nice coffee and, you know, all these cool little things, and they can shine your shoes and send you on your way and collect your check. And that's that. And a lot of companies like that, they have annual reviews, and they do that to manage their funds.
Right.
Consumers don't do that. Consumers literally, could do a survey of over the consumers that I have worked with, where I say, when's the last time you saw your guy? 9 times out of 10, Miguel, they're like,
A guy.
man, what guy? Like,
Is it mainly
thank
just
you.
about like I just want to take care of it and move on because I got so many other things to do? Is that what it is?
Most of it is that it's an inconvenience to them. They see it as an inconvenience, and so that's, again, from my perspective, I have to get in the mind of a consumer to make it less inconvenient.
That's smart.
Okay, so we run things the same way, and so clients that I've had for 4 years, they know exactly what they're walking into when I do this. So we offer an annual review, and we offer that habitually to any single person that we work with.
Yeah.
We do that electronically. We do that in my office. I do that with a campaign call company. So you're getting touched on, and we are inviting you to come in and have an annual meeting to sit down and do exactly what creative planning does, do exactly what Garmin does, and sit down and go through your stuff. Because I always explain to people, discounts are just like coupons from the store. They have expiration dates.
Yeah.
So if you don't see your guy for years upon years, you lost your expiration date on your coupons and your discounts and savings. And
You're just
also,
trapped.
you're just trapped. And also, to the other extent, I always think about this with State Farm. They have a discount double check.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always kind of like, if you really reverse engineer that thought process, that you should call your insurance agent to have him double check to see if you're getting all of the discounts that you should have already been getting.
Right.
That's what we're going to go with on the marketing, and it works. And I always am just like, people are so like, insurance agents, like, we all talk smack on the big dogs, and that's Progressive and State Farm, because like they do so much stuff and throw so much money in places.
It's so big, we could just do this.
We literally, like, I don't understand how it works, but it works. and it's just because you have people in insurance that just don't have good understanding of insurance.
Right.
And so, like, my clients, I really focus on the education. I really focus on the communication, and then that experience that we have together. That it's genuine, it's authentic, and it's professional for them to feel like it's not a convenience. So that's primarily what I do on the day to day. With COVID, it enhanced that because we just now are by appointment only, so we don't allow people to just walk in anymore. It just helps me keep things clean and sanitized. It helps me make sure I don't have to, like, say, hey, Sue, John was in here an hour before you and he had COVID. I don't want to have to make those phone calls because I sanitize everything before everyone comes and goes. So,
and it hinders so much. It's like we have a business, commercial cleaning business that we do at nighttime, and where that was one reason we didn't want to get COVID, because we're like you'd have to call all your clients. You have to, is one reason we tried to stay as locked down as possible for ourselves, because it's like that messes up everybody's thing. I have to go to the bathroom real quick. Do you still got a few minutes?
I got plenty of time, dude.
Okay, cool.
And he's back.
Hold on 1 second. Let's see. All right. I think I'm still rolling here.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry about that, man. I think too much coffee.
You're good, bro.
My morning's been all crazy. I accidentally overslept. I usually get up pretty early, and then I'm training for an Ironman, and so I tried to get my workout in and running around. So
where are you training at?
Today it was at my house. I have a trainer for my bike because it's just too cold to do it outside. So I was working on that, and then just did some yoga. I'm kind of on so I did a half Ironman about 2 weeks ago, and so I'm more in a rest recovery period right now. So this week's more just yoga, training on the bike, and then I go to the YMCA up here in Platte County, and so yeah, that's where I do a lot of my stuff. And then I need to come spring go outside, do some lake swimming and all that. It's gonna be nuts, man.
The farthest I've swam is I swam 800 meters once.
That's awesome,
but
man.
it wasn't all at once. It was like run or swim 200 and then come back and then
right.
Kind of
but
thing.
But man, swimming is one of those things. If you can go, most people, it doesn't matter how healthy you are, how in shape you are, going 50 yards at the beginning is just tough.
Oh, dude, it's crazy. And when I was getting ready for it, because I was in open water, so it was in the ocean.
Nice.
And
Yeah, that's intense. I've yet to do that one. That scares me, the ocean part. So
dude,
I gotta get prepped.
Yeah, it was real scary, man. I'm not a great swimmer either, so I I spent like 2 months going to Matt Ross every Sunday for 3 hours at a time just to
Uh,
learn better swimming.
nice.
And it's just it's crazy because I could do all this weightlifting and training and stuff, but the second I'd step in the pool, the very next day, man, your body's shot.
Yeah.
I was just
It's a
shot, like energy and like
it's an
exertion to just
equalizer,
like,
man.
it's crazy. And like your joints are like, they're not sore, but your muscles are sore. And you're like,
Right.
this is so weird.
Like
Like
what's
when I work
happening?
out, my joints are more sore than my muscles. And now this is weird, And
Right.
yeah, but swimming is so good for you.
It is. It's really good. And it's funny because I feel like the training process I've learned a lot about. And actually, the beginning of our conversation, you were talking about business wise, slowing down, but getting more like working on more of the details. And it's kind of become a lesson in life for me because swimming, you have to go slow to go fast. Like
Yeah.
you literally have to slow it down
And
and
not a
learn the
lot of
perfect
energy, not a
form.
lot of effort.
Right. And the more effort you put, you almost work against yourself. And it's all form. And it's made me think through like, where else am I doing this in my life? Because like running, you can just power through. Biking, there's form to running. Don't get me wrong. You know this. You've lived that world. But it's just a different level of intensity of focus and form and everything your body has to be doing all the right times and your breathing.
Yeah.
And it's made me think a lot about my own business, about my art. What are the things? Where's the wasted energy? What am I just powering through when I need to really think it through? And yeah, it's a big deal. But so, dude, we covered some big stuff like
Yeah.
injustice that you're fighting and battling, your brand, and what you're building, which is amazing to see. And I'll definitely tag you in all this. One thing you had in there though, and I knew you played D1 ball, but you
Hmm.
were a walk-on at K-State, and
Yeah.
I knew that, but then reading like a little bit of your story behind that, I was like, oh damn, I didn't realize everything that was going into that behind the scenes. So what led you to decide to walk on to K-State, and then what did that journey look like for you as a walk on who actually made it?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick story. So I mean, like when I was a kid, my grandpa lived right off Browning, which is right next. It's like not even half mile maybe, if that, from the stadium.
Nice.
And I remember as a kid playing football in the backyard of my grandpa, and the radio would be on, and he'd be cooking burgers, and he'd have his, stogie in, and we're throwing the ball, and he's pretending to be an announcer, and I'm catching touchdowns all day, left and right, and against air defense, and I'm feeling like the bomb, and but I mean, I will never forget this, Miguel. Like I remember distinctively like what it would smell like, when he would smoke and
Mm.
when he'd be grilling. But then I could hear, man, the stadium roar.
Oh man, and that
And I
roar
could,
is nuts,
as
man.
you
Being in that
know,
town, yeah.
yes, yes. And so, but it was so crazy because we lived so close and the radio station was so delayed that we actually would hear the roar before the actual like announcer said touchdown.
Damn, that's
And
cool.
so like those are the memories that I actually have. Those were the things that helped me kind of, oh, like I want to go play there. I want to go be a part of this team. And then, when I was younger, do you remember I think her name was like Israel Espinosa or
I don't
something
think so.
like that.
Uh,
She was or Tamara Espinosa. She was a Hispanic singer, and she lived near the church, and she did like vocals from time to time. I'm not sure if it was
yeah.
before or after, but her husband or baby daddy was a football player
Uh,
that played at K-State and went into the semi-pro league. And so we went to watch a game one time. It was me and Josh. I was probably 8 or 9. he's 3 years younger than me, so 5 or 6. And we're there, and we're sitting there in the nosebleeds watching this game. Bill Snyder walks right in front of us.
That's crazy.
Sits down right in front of my brother Josh, and my brother Josh is just kicking the back of his seat left and right, just the whole like. And I'm like, and I can't say anything, like, I'm too embarrassed and everything. And so like Bill Snyder, oh yeah, and Bill Snyder, he just gets up, he looks at my brother, and he just moves one seat over, and my brother like doesn't say anything. Game gets over, I get down there, and I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry about that. That's my little brother. Try to get him to stop all that. And he's like, oh no, it's all right, no big deal, and that kind of thing. And I was just like, I shook his hand and said, man, it would be a dream of mine to play for you someday. So fast forward to 2020, I think is when I walked on. And that process was...
To be clear, 20 years old.
When I was 20 years old. Yeah, when I was
20
years old.
When you said 2020, I just didn't want people to think they thought it was this year.
Yeah.
So...
No, it was 2011 or 2012. My grandma passed away in January during Christmas break, and I got to go back home and see all the family. And I was like, man, this football season wasn't that great, and I wasn't enjoying the football program. I enjoyed the school. I went to Mid-American Nazarene in Olathe first. Mm-hmm. And that was on a scholarship, but that experience was terrible because the head coach didn't know that I had 7 fingers. And so when I got there for camp the first day, he goes, why didn't you tell me you had 7 fingers? We just offered you a huge scholarship. And I was like, you saw my tape. I came down and visited twice.
It's like, you offered the scholarship, man. Maybe do your research if that's a problem.
maybe your scouting is really not great. But, also,
that's ridiculous.
I was an all-state football player, so it was just kind of crazy. And so he redshirted me my freshman year after like recruiting me and been like, you're going to be the best. You're going to be the best.
That's crazy.
And so that was a pretty big catch-22 for me. And immediately like grades plummeted. My energy and effort and focus to the school plummeted. Like, and to be honest, I always tell people like at a Christian school, that was the furthest I was away from the Lord, which I always think is ironic. How he revealed how that happens, I guess.
Well, when someone says they live by a certain set of values and then they don't display that, I mean, that's gonna make you not be a fan of those values. So
absolutely. So that's where I was leaving. And when I witnessed my grandma passing, all the family being around, I was like, man, I just, if anything, like I got away from my goal in playing at Kansas State University. And I, maybe if anything, just need to come back, work for the dad's business, and go to school, and maybe by a smidgen of a hope, I get a chance to walk on. And I enrolled in the K-State in February, so it was like week 3 of school, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll let you come on, I guess." And so I came in late, and I just continued to bug the program. Like I went and knocked on the door every week at least until I got a date to try out. And then when I tried out, I just trained my butt off for it, with That's going in the gym. I was going in the gym Monday. Like I would have class at K-State. I'd have classes from like my earliest class was like a 7:10. So I'd have like a 7:10. And I'd be done by like noon or 1, and then I go work for my dad in houses. But before that, I would wake up at 5 a.m. and go train at the rec. And then I would go to class from 7 to around 1. I'd grab a quick bite to eat. I'd be on the job site with my dad from like 2 to say 6:30. And then I'd get home and I'd work like yoga, stretching. I'd watch film or anything I could get my hands on for football and just like learn. And so I did that for like a month and a half, 4 or 5 weeks, and then had my tryout and walked on. My tryout was unique because they don't allow you to use a ball when you do tryouts. So in NCAA, you can't use a ball. At least in the Big 12, you couldn't throw a football or catch football. So you're just running drills. You're running L drills. You're running your 40, agility, stuff like that. And so I didn't actually know that, but when I got there, I think it was like my 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 workout was like 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember. But they told me to show up 15 minutes early. So I showed up 15 minutes early, and I met my recruiter, and that was Joe Gordon. And Joe's like, hey, man, and he has this football, and we start playing catch. And I'm like, playing catch with him and stuff. I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm stretching and playing catch. I'm early. He's like, you got here perfect. Great, thanks. And then like he was like 15 minutes early is cat time. So just so you know, like cat time is always 15 minutes early. That was like a Bill Schneider thing. You show up on cat time. You don't show up on time. You show up on cat time.
Okay.
And so anyways, we're there. We're throwing this football around. And he's like, I've got my back to the complex. And he's like, don't turn around. And we're playing catch. He's like, but on the top of the complex, there's a row of black windows. All the coaches in there right now are watching you play catch with me. And I'm like, oh, I better not drop it. Yeah. And so we're playing catch it. And that's when he tells me, Big 12 guidelines, we're not allowed to use a football during the warm-up. So your warm-up hasn't officially started. But I want you to know that everyone wanted to see you catch a football.
Well played.
And so I'm playing catch and stuff, and we're just going, and he's like, you're going to crush this. And like Joe is my guy. That guy is the dope, man. So yeah, that's when I did my tryout. Later that week, got a letter in the mail that I had gotten on the squad, and I would start in the summer. And so started summer workout programs. And I mean, literally there's a lot of things I will have to say physically that I was not capable of being able to do at the very beginning of like, weights and workouts and things like that because of like the hands. But like very quickly within a year's time, like leaving the program, because I was only in the program for a season and a half. And so being in that program for that long, like I remember like I couldn't do pull-ups without being assisted, like without having someone help me. Right. And then by the end, like I was doing 20 in a row, It was like things like that where I was like, oh man, like I learned so much more about myself and the abilities that I could do. And then like
you see where you can actually take this thing.
Yeah. And the other aspect of it too, and kind of the philosophy and the part of me that like has always been instilled is like, bro, when it came to like positive reinforcement and feedback loops, man, that program, literally you had a trainer handing you water as you're getting water after sprint saying, great job, guys, here's some water.
That's cool to hear. I would have never guessed that was the case. Sorry, I cut you off though.
No, you're good. But I mean, that was just the thing. Like there was literally no one around that could bring any negative energy into the program. Like it was just not allowed. Like we were solely there to be like, it sounds really bad, but like praised upon. And then like we were there to win games. Like we did really well in that department with the tradition of the program. And so
K-State's had some good years.
Yeah. And so like he was really big on like, let's eliminate all the distractions on Saturdays. So let's just go to work on and treat this like a job. Monday to Friday. Saturday, that's a fun time. Like no workouts, no film study, no, let's just go perform, And so that that in the way that he orchestrated, and I always tell people Bill Schneider was like the best CEO orchestrator I've ever met. Like that guy and his attention to detail. I mean, our itinerary, bro, would be like 9:47, 9:37, 9:38. Like to the second he had everything, down pat. And so, you learn a lot being in that program. You create good habits. You could create a really good routine, part of that. And part of that was like, I got really blessed when I was younger. And in high school, we had a former K-State weight trainer when Ron Prince came to K-State.
Okay.
He left and he loved the area, but he didn't want to go coach under Ron Prince. So he came to my high school. Nice. And literally my sophomore year to basically now, I've like had it ingrained in me to wake up at a specific time and do specific things at specific time. And it's like, it's kind of weird because my body like has been wired that way that like I could go to bed at 2 o'clock, Miguel, and I'll still wake up at 5.
That's awesome.
Like it's just really weird stuff. It's awesome and a curse in some regards, you know, because it's discipline, you know, like you're living your life by discipline.
Yeah.
And so that like taught me a lot and has been huge, you know, part of my life and getting me to where I'm at. Like sports is, I know your kids have played sports. Like you learn so much through sports about life,
absolutely.
you know. And so I feel like people kind of take that for granted, and I try to do my best not to. But I mean, like the unique thing that was different about K-State, and then we can talk about some of those, but K-State, so fast forwarding to when I'm 20.
Right.
I go to orientation at K-State for the newcomers. It's the day before the actual first team meeting. And so we're there and we're with Coach Snyder, and he just has like real honest, authentic one-to-one conversations, just trying to get to know us. And they're all one-on-one. And so I'm sitting there, and it's literally his birthday, and it was the day we signed a 5-year extension. And literally, probably most newcomers don't even care about that. They don't even probably know.
Right.
But I listened to 810 Sports, and that's what they said that morning. So I'm like, you know, heading into my orientation interview with Snyder, and I say, hey, happy birthday and congratulations on the extension. And I'm like, I'm really glad I'm going to have you for a little bit longer. And he just says, oh, well, that was already in the works, and thank you very much. And because like, you know, he's the CEO, he's always in control. That was just his thing.
Yeah.
But then I told him, hey, this is going to be real weird. And I was like, do you remember when this happened? I told him the story about my brother. He remembered.
That's
and
amazing.
He goes, and I said, do you remember what I said to you? And he said, yeah, you told me you were going to play for me one day. And I was just like,
that's crazy, dude. That's
you know
awesome.
what I mean? You know, and that was like a surreal thing that totally happened. And then the next day orientation, just to give you an idea of the different type of leadership that I was walking into and leaving from Mid-America to K-State was, when I got to K-State, we had orientation, and we had, you know, like I said, the team meeting, and then he says, okay, we get to this team meeting. He's like, I want you to stand up, say your name, your class, what position you play, and where you're from. And so I get up, do that, and I sit down. He's like, young man, please stand back up. I'm in the back of the room because that's where the running backs sit. And I'm like, oh, crap. Like, I already messed up. Like, what did I do?
You're like, damn it, I'm an example now.
I know. Like, I was just like, what? And so I stood up in front of everyone because everyone's sitting down, and I'm like, and I stand up, and he goes, this young man was made a little bit more unique and different than us, but he just said, I cannot stress this enough, we are a family, and we do not cut each other down, we do not disrespect one another, and I'm making it known if you say anything that is cutting this human like him down. He goes, this goes across all staff. He's like, if I hear anything, those are the last words that you'll ever have on this as a part of this team. And he's like, you can sit back down. And I was just like, whoa, like you just literally set this. He set the stage as far as the type of person that I would be, you know, I'm already part of it. Like, I'm already a part of the family. Like, we don't have to, there's no hazing with this guy. There's no, like, as if there was any at K-State. But right. I mean, at Mid-America, I was crab boy on the team. I was literally like, the head coach would call me crab boy, or these players would call me.
Really?
I'm not. No, I'm not. I mean, and I had teammates at Mid-America that would not let me touch them with my left hand. I'm not kidding. Like, they did not want to be touched with my left hand. And so, like, I mean, it was very different at K-State. And that's where I realized good leadership, bad leadership, right? And that's when I was like, okay, I'm like legitimately part of a program here. This is what's supposed to be like. This is how it's supposed to be done. So listen up. And I learned so much from just that type of leadership example, And so Like that was my time at K-State, where like literally I created a routine, I created habits, I created great relationships. I still am really close with a lot of the like some teammates and some academic advisors that I had back when I was at K-State. I was just talking to one over the weekend for the holidays. And when you're in an environment like that, you can't be nothing but a sponge.
Yeah.
And so like there's so many great memories. I got to meet so many awesome people, and got to play with like Tyler Lockett and Byron Pringle now for the Chiefs, and Colin Klein, and the list kind of goes on and on of great players that are from K-State. But it's cool because the other factor that I realized too, even being from Manhattan, was there was so much about the school and the university that I had no idea. There was just like literally, man, there were buildings I've probably driven by it thousands of times, never been in. That like when I was at K-State, I did feel like I was like a visitor to some degree.
Huh.
And so there was like a nuance of a new college experience that I didn't even know existed like in my backyard, And so that was kind of cool. I got to enjoy that, and it was really fun. And like I said, I learned like a ton of stuff just getting to be a part of that program.
There's so many lessons, I think, in that, lessons of leadership. And it kind of made me emotional hearing that story when I think of just being a father in general. I got 4 boys, and sometimes boys like to shit on each other, just part of the culture.
Totally.
But luckily they all are very supportive of each other in a lot of ways too. But it just makes me think, what kind of culture do I want to build in my own family and the friends, the people around me? But I also think they're even kind of referencing our earlier part of the conversation. There's this concept where, imagine if you didn't take that journey to K-State. Or imagine if you just kept pushing through at Mid-America thinking this is just what it is. You would have thought maybe life would always be that way. To me, I hear a great lesson in there that if you find yourself in a damaging situation, that you can take it upon yourself to remove. And that doesn't take away from all the hard parts of doing that. But in the end, it's like, if your environment is not conducive to your growth, you don't have to put up with it. Go find a new environment.
100%. And the biggest lesson that I would say to put the cherry on top of that, Miguel, is don't turn back. Don't turn back. Like, seriously, like when literally that was the exact phrase my dad said when I was like, Dad, I think I want to transfer. I brought it up to my dad. I was like, maybe I should transfer. You could use a hand in the business, and I could help out here around the house, and da 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 da. And he's like, okay, well, as soon as you do that, you can't turn back. And I really like wrestled with that, because you have friends that are actually genuine there, and you have relationships with faculty that are genuine there. I loved the school, and I loved the faculty and staff there. I just hated the football program, and it didn't help.
And you're kind of a big part of your life being part.
40 hours a week was going to that. So I get it. But yeah, when you make that decision, man, even if it's going to be like where you have people that are innocently in the way of that, that burning that bridge, like, even though they're on the other end of that and they were good and wholesome for you in that time, like, you can't turn back to it, And so that was a big lesson that I had to learn. And so it was hard, but then, when I got to come back to Kansas City, I came back like in what you're saying, like, if I had stayed, dude,
it's so crazy to think about. But that's kudos. Kudos to you for taking that journey, and that's cool. Don't turn back. Like, there's been a lot of wisdom your dad has, put into my life throughout my 20s when I was around your family, and that's cool that he gave you that.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's probably like something he didn't even realize he did. It was just like, hey, like, don't turn back, like, just like in passing, like, don't turn back, like.
I used to be a bull rider. That's how I see life. Don't turn back.
Yeah. So it's just like, it was really valuable though, because looking at it, if you're looking at anything in your life, whether you're looking at a career change, or you're looking at even like relationships and how you want to change those, or maybe even like end them, like some people, like, you can manage to maybe navigate that knife and carve out the good from the bad.
Mm.
But for probably most circumstances, like, yeah, you probably do have to get out of the way, and you have to let that thing go,
Yeah.
and that can be really hard, for sure.
That's huge, man. That's a huge lesson. So, well, and man, I'm loving this conversation. I wish I could just keep doing this all day. And maybe one day we'll have to get coffee in person and,
Yeah, dude. Or
somewhere around like
come by
July
the
or
office,
something.
because that's something that, I mean, where I'm looking at, like, really making an impact is with the statistic of insurance, and that being such a low to statistics for African Americans to be a part of in the industry, is representation, right?
Mm.
And it's one thing to see it represented on television, but to have it actually in your community is a big thing. And so
Mm.
part of that, in my, like, kind of like church outreach approach, if you will, if I was like a nonprofit church organization, is coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee creates community, man. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people sit down over a cup of coffee often. If not, that's maybe the sole reason why some people drink coffee. So pretty soon you'll have, like, coffee. Do you drink it socially or religiously? It's like,
At least 5 to 7 times a week socially, and sometimes by myself.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, it'll get to that point. But I just know that if I owned a coffee shop where my face was local, and coffee brings foot traffic, which brings people to a business or into a specific location,
Mm-hmm.
then what good could come out of that? Like, oh, okay, well, there's financial literacy issues, there's parenting issues, there's business seminars and job fairs and
Yeah.
so forth, like, that you could create. And so part of the business and what I've been planning on working on is developing a coffee business in Kansas City, Kansas, that is a coffee shop by day and a resource center for the community by night.
I love
And
it, man.
that being with, like, school and after school tutoring to life parenting skills and hacks to motivational speakers or benefit programs and concerts and all sorts of things that I
That's
would love
cool.
to do to just, again, like, enrich a community that is, like, desperately needing some of those things, like love, joy, and cheer, man. Like, let's just spread it. And so, I mean, that's kind of the goal, and that's something that I've been planning for, like, the last year. And that's going to be something that's going to be called Kinship Cafe for
Nice.
KC. And it's just, goal, again, just to, enrich the community. I'm not, like, literally, like, I told the people that I have that are starting to get involved, if you're in this because of the money, you're in the wrong place. Like, this is not about making more money or just doing, no, I have zero goals financially for this. Like, literally, one of the people that I've worked with is the owner from Key Coffee,
Okay.
Cafe
Yeah.
Equinox, and he's the owner of Balmaeus, the old Balmaeus. And
Mm-hmm.
so he's like, man, most people don't want to do this, but we could just run the coffee shop for you and staff it and everything, and you just share profits. But most people don't want to do that. I'm like, cool, sounds
Like,
great to
let's do it.
me. He's like, wait, really? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm not in it for the money. Like, it's not about the money. And part of that is, like, with business and small businesses and things, is I want to create a culture of selfless leaders, people that
Mm.
want to do good for others just because they can. And I don't, especially a world that's, like, looking for the do-gooders, the people
Mm-hmm.
that are, like, instilling hope and
Yeah.
saying, like, chivalry's not dead and I can have hope for humanity because someone gave me my $10 that I dropped. Like, those things actually are important.
Mm-hmm.
And that the selfish leadership tendencies that our president has had in years past, I'm
Right.
including past presidents even, to CEOs, to influencers in different industries, it's kind of a selfish game.
Yeah.
And I don't see the appeal. And so I would rather build a culture of people that are wanting to be selfless and impact their communities and make it the world
That's
hopefully
awesome.
better when they found it, than when they found it. So
Do you know
so
Gary
yeah,
V?
man.
Are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I love, and I have a love-hate relationship with Gary Vee because I love Gary Vee for who he is
Uh,
and what he does to the industry, but I have a hate relationship with it because so many people want to act and be like him. And I'm like,
yeah.
there's
It's
only
like you
one
got to
Gary
be.
Vee.
I've seen some people. Actually, there's a podcaster I follow. I won't name his name, but I've gleaned so many good things from him. But I could tell all of a sudden he started listening to Gary Vee because like Gary Vee's like fuck this, fuck like he's just
Yeah,
that's who he is. He's a New Yorker,
he's pretty brash.
and the other guy is not. He's from the South, and he's always been very like nice. And then all of a sudden he's like blah blah and like saying, I was like, bro, it's just it's coming across not authentic. But
And
what I
it's
love is the empathy piece where he's trying to make it like you don't have to be an asshole to run a company. You know,
yeah.
you can actually care about the people that you work for or that
Yeah,
work for you.
another good person is Simon Sinek.
Oh yeah, I
That's
love Simon
another great guy. And what I like most about Simon is that he's like, hey man, like I'm not trying to create a movement. Like I'm just Simon, you know,
Sinek.
like, and that's kind of I like the authenticity to that because it just keeps it real, and it's like my agenda is just to live a good life, and if people want to like listen to what I think that is, cool. If I get a
Like,
check from it, great. If I don't, whatever. Like it's cool, but I just think like the world needs more people like that. And you know, like when you reached out to me and I did some research on, and then you told me kind of what you were doing, like yeah, man, like it's awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show today. But I mean, ultimately, like, you know, what you're doing, Miguel, is unheard of. Like to create a platform to recognize others. Who does that? Why wouldn't you make it about you, Miguel? Why wouldn't you know what I mean? Like that's what the selfish business industry podcast world is about right now is that. And so it's unique that you're building a platform that you're creating authentic conversations around some really hard stuff and some just like go happy stuff, but at the same time like you're recognizing people for who they are, and I appreciate that. That's like,
well, thank you, man.
That's where the rubber hits the road for a lot of people, and it honestly it cuts through all the bullshit.
Well, thanks. Yes, less bullshit. That's the 2021 thing. But you
Man.
you had said great life in there. What that looks like for you, like trying to live a great life. And
well, I think a large part of it. I think a large part of that is time, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you want to spend your time.
Yeah.
More people have had more time this year than maybe they are used to, and
or
they've
wanted.
been having, and they've been having to spend their time in ways differently than they ever have. And there's, like we discussed, nuances that are really good about that. And then not some good things where you're like, oh man, I need to fix this about myself or my business, or you know what I mean, or we need to pivot to, or whatever. But I think the good life is evaluating your time and utilizing what time you have to do what you think is the most life-giving. And that could be traveling, that could be spending time with your family, that could be working. I mean, some people, I am one of those weird people. I enjoy working. Like,
that's if I'm not putting my hands to some things and making things happen, I'm not happy. Yeah, I feel
people
you.
People ask me what my hobby is, and I honestly have a hard time answering to, like, people are like, what's your hobby? And I'm like, what? And they're like, no, like I really enjoy like putting my mind to paper and trying to look at a business problem that I'm having, or a solution that I could make, again, someone's time with me better. Right, that experience to be better with working with me, I put my mind to that, and that's kind of where it, you know, these are the results of that. But
I smile just because that's what I've told people. Like, literally up to this year, I didn't even understand the idea of a hobby. I just didn't get it when my friends were into it. I was always told I needed one. I was like, I like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I took up two things that I would call hobbies, where I've started training more with like my own weapons, and then this Iron Man thing. But I'm already, after a year of doing that as a hobby, I'm already like, okay, how could I make money doing that? And how could I turn it into this? And how that's like, yeah, but that's what I love. That's what I love doing.
And that's the benefit. Like, that's the way you're wired in your mind. I mean, I think, and I always tell people when they do that, like, keep what's sacred and what you love to be what you love, and not what needs to be made money off of, you know, and like that's to each their own, you know, but I'm always the one person doing the same thing, you know. It's like, I love doing this. How can I monetize this, or
how do you sustain it? For me, it's a question of sustainability.
Yes.
So
Yes, and it's because like your time is money. Like as a father, as a
Mm,
husband, as a business owner, like you can only be stretched in so many ways with your
right.
time to utilize it to make sure it's sustainable for not only just your happiness but also your well-being financially. So I 100% agree with you. But I think living the good life or living a good life is, utilizing your time to do the things that you just love most, and for me, like, I love being around people. I love to talk with people. I like to make sure that um, that the four things that I care about in my life. If I die, Miguel, and you go to my funeral, if you happen to, my four things I want to be known for is I want to be known to be a good husband. So hopefully I get married someday. A good father. So hopefully I have kids. And I'm going to be known as a person that like loved people extremely well. I loved people extremely well. Not just black people, not just white people, not just all people. And then lastly, I want to be a person who's known that I love the Lord. And those are really hard things in this year to honor,
Mm,
right? In so many ways, divorce rates through the roof,
hmm.
abandoned families from, like basically fatherless homes, right, are through the roof right now. And then like, who the heck wants to love people? People suck. And then number four, like, is there even a God? I mean, 2020, come on. Like, so I mean, all of those things have been tested to some degree this year. But I think like ultimately like living the good life is just utilizing my time to just enjoy those things and enjoy the people that I'm around, enjoy music that you get to create, that I get to create, spend time with my dog, travel a little bit more, those types of things.
I
So
love it.
that
That's
to
why we
me
didn't
is
even
like,
touch on the fact that you're also a drummer, and, we used to play music
yeah,
together. So
yeah.
yeah,
We used to play music together, man. I miss those days. But yeah, I mean, and my playing is like definitely, again, it's like, because I know I'm so stretched thin and I have all of these things that I want to either monetize or make it a hobby or whatever. Like when I give myself an hour to music, like it's not wasted. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like I'm putting pen to pad, I'm recording something, I'm trying something new, I'm listening to something, trying to get something down. Those are the types of things that I do, and I've been more like working behind the scenes with a lot of that stuff with like
Yeah.
like I'm more inspired by other poets than I am to just sit by myself and write, because I do that, but it's more like from an interest perspective. But then when I like listen to other poets or mostly musicians and
Mm.
like that art form, that's where I get a lot of inspiration from. So like it's December, so like a couple of weeks ago, Kid Cudi put a new album out, and
I've
I've
been
been
listening to him nonstop for the last week, bro. It's so good. So like all of it. I just I had him on his playlist. I went to the
this
gym
sure
and I was
was
there
inspired.
forever.
I
I just
mean,
can't even
this
stop listening to it.
I've been I kid. You want to talk about dark days and how I've gone through a lot of them. Kid Cudi back in Mid America time, back
Mm,
10 years ago, while I was struggling with a lot of identity and things like that in my life. Like there was like I found so much safety in knowing that like there are people like him who are very estranged to their industry because they're
mm,
different
yeah.
and because like they approach it in such a unique way. And in a way, honestly, I mean, he would probably say music has saved him just as much as he's saved a lot of people with music. I mean, music has probably been a very therapeutic thing for
Mm,
him and his process over the years. And so I really appreciate like his approach towards music, and then just the way that he puts albums together, like stories,
yeah.
and how it's just like a huge dream, and it's just like it's I was I was telling someone the other day, it's like it's almost crazy because I'm listening to a lot of his old stuff,
Hmm.
and the way that he tags stuff back from way back when to now, it's just like he has to have a book that he's like pulling stuff out of from
He's got the
decades.
thing in the back where he's just like charting it
Oh,
out.
he's
Yeah,
got to,
that's
because it's just like it's incredibly powerful. If you listen to Solo Dolo from the first hit to part two to part three that he just released, they actually all tell a similar timeline and different. It's like different levels of dreams, and so it's just like,
Interesting.
whoa, like, dude, you actually are building upon this one song from 2008
Interesting.
or
I'll have to
9.
listen through that lens.
It's just
That'll be
really
cool.
crazy. And I also, his approach is more like, it's more like he puts more thought process into a finished project from more of the storytelling side,
Yeah.
rather than the like orchestrating musically like inclined. Like, I mean, it's very musically inclined. Like, it's
Yes.
his
The
musicianship
music's
and
great.
production is great. But I would say, like, there's not many artists today, especially in the rap and hip hop era, like genre, that write storytelling albums. From
Right.
start to finish, you can hear his entire album tell a story.
Well, and I think that's why
Whereas, like,
Damn was such a powerful, for Kendrick, was such a powerful album, because like start to finish, it took you somewhere. And honestly, Kanye's album, a lot of people hated it, but I loved it. It's the one where he is like
no,
more spoken word. Like what he said, like I will, like something like I would kill you. You better believe me, because I don't even like myself, and I would kill myself, or something. Like, do you remember that, where he opens with
yes.
something like that? And it really went somewhere. It was kind of a
And I
flop
kind of
for
feel
a
bad
Kanye
for
thing.
I kind of feel bad for Kanye, because I feel like some of his stuff from like 2012-ish to like 16-ish was just way ahead of time. It was
Yeah.
just like, I mean, he was challenging undertone, like gospel undertone, and like just like like spirituality and like all of these things. He was really challenging them, like on an
Yeah.
underneath level. And you're right, like it's like there's like an internal thought process in his, like, he's bringing you into his world with his music, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
not the other way around,
You might not get that world. I might not fully understand it,
Totally.
because I don't know what's going on in that brain. But it took me on a journey. I know it's unpopular opinion, because that particular album most people didn't like, but there was something
Well,
about it. That's why I love that
the
story aspect.
the thing about and it's funny because most Christians are like flipping in their graves, or they're just like irate about Kanye coming out and loving Jesus. It's like, well, let's go ahead and just start calling you fake, and start calling your life and your journey with the Lord fake. Because I always have this really hard time, and I was telling someone this, I really have a hard time this like defaming someone's like stake in the ground. Like they had to have a moment to literally make this move. Like, this was a momentous moment in their life where they made this decision, and they're now saying these things public, knowing the repercussions, knowing like how people are going to say that he sounds insane and all of these things. And
Yeah, this whole
he is, it's definitely out there. It's definitely out there. But I guess my thing is,
I
like,
definitely have been guilty of that.
I just can't. It's just hard to challenge someone who has had this conviction,
Yeah.
and that's where it's like a good story that comes to my mind is like, I have a friend that was missionaries, and they went into the Philippines, which is a very, very like heavy dark magic like area. Like, Philippines is I think one of the top, if not the top, where dark magic is practiced. And they would go to these places and do these revivals, and people would give their life to the Lord, and they would tell them like, hey, where you're at, what's going on around you, like, you're probably going to die if you claim Jesus and all this. And they're like, yeah, I know. And finally, like, the people were like, they were so upset that they kept getting asked this disclosure, like, you realize you might die, you realize, like the third time. And they're like, hey, like, we actually saw the Lord, and he actually told us this was going to happen, and you just weren't there to see it. And so you can't understand, but yes, we understand we might die. And I'm just like, man, no one's going to argue that. And so I'm always like, if Kanye had that moment, why, what kind of person would I be to argue that? Just like if anyone would argue why you do music or why I do what I do, it's like, and so I always struggle with that. But at the same time, I'm always like, man, the least I can do is just pray for that man's walk, and that the Lord just
Well,
continues to.
and I don't know if it's fully just to argue it. I think there is a good thing to always question, have
Yes.
people at least get people to start thinking about their own experiences and question those things, which is hard. It's hard to do that when someone's famous and you're not in that person's circle, because I mean they don't care what you think, like
Yes.
it's and you don't know the full story either. Where I was making fun of it's a different conversation than the spiritual piece, but Justin Bieber song, I'm the new one with him being lonely. I'm like, oh, he's so lonely, guy. Like, and making fun of him. And she was challenging me on that. She's like, you don't really know what people's lives are like until you can actually enter them,
Mm,
and it's like, oh, and to find out where there's some people, I actually know some people who are fairly wealthy, and they can come across sometimes as like cold, but then the more I've gotten to know some of these folks, figuring out most of their life is people begging them or asking them for money, not begging like a street court, but like a
right.
family member being angry that they won't give them $200,000, or a family member, and realizing that most of their relationships came down to money. So it's caused them to put up walls. Now, it doesn't
Hmm.
excuse bad behavior, but I guess the main point is, at the end of the day, I really don't know what Kanye is thinking, because I'm
Yep.
not in Kanye's circle. But I do
Yeah. And
think
so that's why I like.
challenging thoughts and having people actually ask questions. Did you experience this? Is this real? Is valuable.
Yeah.
But I do think I definitely see the point in the idea, like it's hard to know what someone's really going through, what they really think, unless you're sitting down with them and unless you're
Yeah.
in those circles.
But he's still a very like from an artistic standpoint.
Mm.
I mean, he's like the Van Gogh to hip hop,
Yeah. To deny
probably.
his artistry
You know,
is
yeah,
insane, and his
it's
influence on all music, not just hip hop.
well, and
Uh,
fashion now.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, that's the other factor that it's like, love it or hate it, but this guy's like actually really influential in a lot of different industries. And not to say that, others won't be, but like to go back to Kid Cudi, I mean, that's where like people like Kanye, people like I look back at rappers that were from the 90s and early 2000s before those two.
mm,
And really the ones that stand out are like Andre 3000 and
yep,
Outkast, when they really shifted and changed in the early 2000s. But next to that, you don't really have much as
no,
far as who is an outlier or different in their genre, who wasn't a one-hit wonder.
right.
And
That's
so
like, I
that's
love
that's
Arrested Development, but they really didn't have much after Mr. Window in Tennessee that came out. But
yes.
there's something about that. Wycliffe though, Wycliffe, like,
Wycliffe and Pharrell were also part
yes,
of their own, in their own special box when it came to music, and I put Bruno Mars in that too when it
dude,
comes to the R&B, and because he really brought in like the live music, like he really brought in brass instruments and horns
yeah,
into like his music, and I think that added so much taste that like to be honest, like I think hip hop and R&B like they miss on, or they don't. A
mm,
lot of people don't understand that kind of quality and taste into musicianship. When
right,
you think about I think of Kanye West and what he's doing right now with Sunday Service, right? Where he's doing
uh,
these huge gatherings, and I tell people like next to heaven, you'll probably never hear a gospel choir that great.
that good. Well, he's going to surround himself with the best,
Literally
people
the
out there.
best.
Yeah.
Literally the best. That has never been done in the entire history of any gospel or like group ever. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's just like
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful thing to see. And I really appreciate that. But I think with Kid Cudi and those types of people is like my only hope is like in 10, 20, 30 years, they're not the afterthoughts like Outkast. They're not the afterthoughts
Right.
of like Wyclef or those other people that we mentioned. Like they're still pushing the envelope in their industry and hopefully still having some influence.
Well, and
It's
that's the
just it's
piece, though. One thing, check out Wycliffe, though, because like from a political standpoint, especially in Haiti, making huge impacts. But he kind of shifted, I think. But yeah, there's some that just kind of fall off. I think J. Cole, Kendrick, like those are going to be people in 20 years that really come up. There's some other in a different world, but my oldest loves NBA YoungBoy, and he's
mm,
impacts in a different way, a little
hmm.
different of a vibe. But there's some people that right now I think
No,
have the
but I mean, like,
potential.
I think
They just got to
those
ride
are
it out.
also people in that industry that I would have to say are true artists.
Yeah.
And that I think another thing, and you please tell me and comment on this freely, like I feel like mainstream music is changing because there's this battle against produced, and
Hmm.
then there's this battle against authenticity and like
Right.
artists approach, like the creativity. And I feel like it is yesterday. It's no longer like a cool thing to try to be the Taylor Swift or the Avril Lavigne or the the Young Money, Little Wayne production. Like it's uncool to be those things anymore. It's more cool to just be yourself
Yeah.
and to like have your artistry. And I think some people have challenged that. Like I there's I like Kid Cudi, but I was thinking females. Um,
Well, even Megan the Stallion, it's highly produced, but
yes,
like her approach online and what she's willing to talk about is very outside the mainstream. So I think she brings it. You see that. God, why can't Lizzo in her career? It's
yes.
these different topics that the world's not used to talking about and being presented with, and I think she's living that out. Even though it is, in a sense, like highly produced, but I
This
think
is
it's almost
so
how they
sad.
carry themselves publicly.
Who's the white girl that sang the song and won like the most Grammys next to Beyonce?
Billie Eilish,
Not Billie Eilish, but
because
I
she
was gonna
won a
mention Billie
shit
Eilish
ton of.
because they're also
Okay.
very authentic. It's
Yeah.
like she had like her album was all about a breakup, and this was like 2 or 3 years ago.
I'm not.
Adele,
Oh
Adele.
yes, gotcha.
Adele is one of those people that challenged that.
Yeah.
She truly challenged that artistry. And another group that I also and I think those like mainstream when you're talking
Mm,
about like who you're gonna listen to, there's like a battle against mainstream produced and mainstream like creativity artistry, right?
right.
And then I think on the flip side you have performance, which I think performance is like leaning kind of more into like your like well especially now like your more like local stuff like your
Yeah.
local grunge bands and stuff like that are still able to stay around because like dude Black Keys are 80,000 a book, like who's gonna pay that, you know what I mean? And so I mean I'm curious, like I really like I'm interested to know like I really like instrumental music, like
Uh,
I'm a big instrumental vibe guy. It helps me through work because words make me think too much.
mhm.
So, like, what are some instrumental music groups or people that you like to listen to? If you're just wanting to listen to something like in the background, or just like maybe it's like a musically inclined.
Like 98% of the time, like no joke, it's old school Moby. That's what I love. Like, because I'm the same way. Like, and one, I love like more of the electronic music thing, but um, that's just what I have going when I need to focus on something. Because I'm the same way. If there's lyrics, I'm getting drawn into the lyrics, and if there's lyrics for him, typically it's like a loop of a lyric, over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. And he actually has some that are all like almost like meditative, like they're not even fully structured songs. They're like called ambience or something. And I have
Mm.
two of those in my playlist is what I listen to throughout it. But yeah, I get made fun of a lot because I listen to Moby.
No, I just appreciate like instrumental music because it's
Mm.
like easy go listening music. But there's a local group I really like if we're allowed to push them.
Oh
But
yeah, you're allowed to do whatever, man.
JTL Studios down in Grandview. I've got some
Okay.
really great friends that do work with Music Bed,
Uh huh.
and they're called Utah,
Nice.
and they have close to 100,000 listeners monthly on their
Dang.
Spotify, and they have maybe it's 1,000. It's probably 1,000 actually, and And another guy named Ryan James Carr,
Okay. Not
which
familiar
you've
with him.
probably heard of. He's a drummer. He's a really good drummer out of here in Kansas City. And he put out his first album maybe last year in the summer.
Okay.
But for a drummer, if you listen to it, you won't actually believe he's a drummer. And the craziest thing about it, it's lo-fi. It's like lo-fi jazz, chill hop.
Okay.
But the
So
drumming
stacking them
beats,
up.
yeah, the drumming beats are live.
Nice.
So
I dig that.
everything is. He's probably he might be the most technical drummer I've ever met. Like
Hmm.
he is. Oh, dude, it's stupid how technical he is, and he's just here. He lives here in Mission. Um,
Yeah, I'll have to check
and
that
then
out.
and then Wolfpack.
What is it?
Oh,
You'll have to send me a link of that one.
okay, Vulfpeck, all one word. You've
Okay.
got literally, bro. It's going to blow your mind. These are small town musicians from Michigan.
Okay.
All of them are good friends. They sold out. The Madison Square Garden 2 nights in a row.
How do I not
Yes,
know them?
that's why I'm kind of like, wait. Okay, so just give them a listen, but bro, it is like
Okay.
I can't. It's like Beatles, good, like the feel good Beatles, like
Uh,
summer in the summer in the like that,
right. Like kind of
like
the
that
more
kind of stuff,
poppy
like
vibe.
more poppy, but then it's got like funk fusion with jazz,
Nice.
with
Okay.
like horns, and so it's like 5 or 6 guys who literally, bro, like the musicianship that they have over
Off the
4 to 5
charts.
different instruments are off the charts. Like we're
That's
talking
awesome.
like you hear songs and you're like, oh, that's got to be a female they must have brought in to sing. All of the guys. It's
One of
just
them pulled
like
it off.
straight up falsetto. Oh, dude, it's just like, and they have in their group they have 2 or 3 of their like notably like top musicians. Like they have one of the top bassists. They have one of the top drummers, and they have one of the top guitarists in the nation. And it's
Wow.
just and they're just all like good friends. And like they do this show on Madison Square Garden. It's a YouTube show, or it's a YouTube like concert series,
Hmm.
and it's a guy live the entire time on the stage walking as they perform their live set in Madison.
Wow.
And it's just nonstop, just unreal, just fun. And they have flutes, cellos, they have bassists, upright to electric. They have drummers.
I love it.
They have a Congo like djembe, total Latin American like setup, like all on stage. There's multiple pianos, multiple electric guitarists. It's just like an insane and bro, like they are tight, like so tight. It's
That's
and they
awesome.
like it's like a living room playset too on the stage. And so you see like some guys like playing the trumpet, and he's like in a couch, and they're just having a good time, but they're playing in front of like 20,000 people. And it's just but everything that they produce, bro. I mean, from like I think the group's been around since 2012 or
Okay.
13. But dude, they are everything they put out. It literally you can appreciate every single thing that they do. It's just
That's cool.
if you like music, if you like musicianship, it is
I have to check them out.
so oh dude, it's just
One band for you to check out too is Making Movies. Are you familiar with them?
mm-mm.
They're Kansas City based band, but they've toured all over the place. They played for like the president of Panama. They've been on Latin Grammys. Like they're amazing, and they're doing great things in the city. Enrique, their lead singer, is actually going to be a guest on the podcast here. I think in February he's scheduled. But yeah, Making
Yo.
Movies, music's amazing. But so
So
for
are you
oh
doing
god,
more local? Are you doing more local stuff, or because I
right
saw
now,
like you were at Record Bar, and were you at Merit not too long ago too?
no, I don't think so.
Okay, maybe I saw some.
Yeah, most of my stuff's local right now. I did a 3-week tour, West Coast, South, everywhere back end of 2019. And yeah, just kind of revisiting the business plan of all of that, because touring, especially right now, is almost impossible. But yeah, it's got to make sense.
And is that
Right
all
now, it's just not
is
making
that
sense.
just all under Miguel? Like, are you
Yeah,
just going and doing
yeah,
solo,
just
or are
solo
you?
now. Yeah, just solo now, and then I'll have a band when it makes sense backing me but now it's just focused on that. So
Has that been like a good transition? Because I know you've always, like, you've usually traveled in bands, and
mm,
you know you've always had like I mean, the last 10 years, I think you've had a good following of people and bands and stuff supporting you.
yep.
So, like, what made you change to go into solo, or
It's just a
was there
reality.
something?
We got to the end of Run With It, and what became the end of Run With It. And man, we were busting our ass. We had toured to the Middle East and back, had done some great stuff, released a great album.
Serious.
But the reality of being able to pay everybody and even pay myself just became a harsher reality. And so
Oh, dude, if you
look,
had them right now during COVID, I can't imagine the stress.
yeah, and that was just that's the tough part of this industry. So I figured dial it back, just go solo, and then when I can, hire one of the guys. Like we played gigs together, my band before, or from before, where I've hired them to come like back me up basically as a solo artist. But then financially it makes sense, and they're free to go do whatever they're doing, and yeah, so it's been weird. Touring sucks when you're solo compared to touring with a band and a photographer, videographer, and all that. So this last tour, that was brutal. I love being in the different places, but the drive from place to place got really old real quick. So I think if I do some touring, it'll probably be more. A lot of my friends who are solo artists are flying in, dropping in, playing a show, flying out. I think I'm going to have to transition to more something like that, if and all that of how things open up. But so for the last question though, if you could boil it down, because we talked about living a great life, but if you could boil it down, what does creating great things mean to you right now?
What does creating great things to me mean to me and look right now? You know, right now, I mean, we're gearing up the end of 2020, right? And we had kind of hashed on some things like don't look back, right? There are some things in 2020 that I think, if I'm being honest and things are looking and going good, it's because I let some things go from 2020.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so there's some things I'm still like navigating through and carving. And I think everyone probably is doing that to some degree. Of there's things that you've already like been like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait till next year to let this go and to get it out of my life. Or there's just things that you haven't been able to give a lot of thought towards and developing, like, do I really need this in my life? So I'm still doing some of that, but I think saying goodbye to certain things, and then ultimately, man, I think also a large part of it is just like working and surrounding myself around people that are like-minded, around people that are selfless, around people that are wanting to enrich their community, their culture, and that's a really, really long haul thing. Like it's very hard to do. We've talked, it's going to take more than one person. It's going to take more than one day. It's going to take maybe an entire lifetime
Yeah.
and thousands of people to do. But if there's something that I can do to throw, whatever effort into the direction where our world is becoming better because of TJ Roberts, that's kind of the energy and the focus that I want to do.
That's cool.
And so that's kind of like, I feel like, especially this year, we can all attest that we share responsibility in each other's lives by making sure we're making each other's lives better, and that from being like, to the things that we post on Facebook, to the conversations that we have, to the, the business that we do with others, the type of thing, how you treat people really matters,
Mm-hmm.
and if anything is true about this year, is that everybody is going through something,
Yeah.
because we all are. whether it's just the schedule of what COVID's done to it, to where you can work and where you can't work, and where you can go and what you can do, and to what you can't and can't do, like all those things, right? Everyone's going through something. And so if I'm responding to you in a way that's like disingenuous or disrespectful, it's not promoting or helping your life any better, then I failed at doing those great things, or living that life that looks great. And so I think like more along the lines of the intention, right? The intention of what I do with my time, who I spend it with, letting the things go in 2020 that didn't serve me any purpose or give me any life. And then moving forward to, I got to find more. I got to have more friends. I got to have more people that are in my corner that are also like-minded, that are also wanting to, because it's not just it can't just be me that wants to make this world better. It can't just be you or anyone. You're calling people that care about people, and so finding more people like that, that's always going to benefit. And so,
creation and living. It sounds like creation and living is really about the collaborative process for you.
Collaborative thought, man. I mean, a lot of people always like, since you run a business or you do music or something, people are like, how did you do that? What gave you that? Everyone's asking that. And I'm always kind of like, stop thinking about it and just do it. What I mean? Like that's like that's the best answer that some of us can give them at this point is that we thought about it, but we didn't think about it very long. We just went out and did it. And so, part of it is that collaboration. And so I always try to tell people, you don't have to know everything to go out and do something. You don't have to know how to write music to write music. You can actually hum something and record it. And nowadays with technology, you could make a TikTok video out of it. Yeah, like you can do whatever. But collaborative thought is a really, really it's a sacred thing in today's time. Where like people here in Mission, like I'm like, hey Baker, you should go to the restaurant down the street. They don't have dessert. Why don't you offer dessert and throw it on their menu? Like collaborative. Like why would you not do that? And so I always think like I'll tell people that Steve Jobs, like he did not know how to ship a computer from California to Kansas City and stay profitable. But he knew the right people who shared the idea of Apple and their values and helped him create what is, the iPhone and the iPod and so forth. And so that took collaborative thought. So even Steve Jobs, one of, maybe if not the most innovative person in technology, who's created all of these great platforms and things, like literally those all came from him sitting in a room around people that also believed in that, and they made it happen. And that was collaborative thought. And so I challenge people to do that a lot. And, some of it's good. And some people are like, well, always get this naysayers and complainers.
Well, man, I love it, man. Well, thanks for making the time. I appreciate it.
Dude, yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you giving me time. Sorry, we went a little long, but I mean,
no, it's all good.
It's been years.
But yeah, man, well, thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.